Hey everyone, and welcome back to Ontario Cryptids. Today I have 3 encounter stories to share with you all. The last one I promoted in my Friday night shorts, so make sure you listen all the way to the end. Okay, if you've been enjoying my content, why not take a quick second to hit that subscribe button and hit that notification bell. That way you'll never miss out on the latest episode, and you'll be joining a community of like-minded individuals who share your interests. Let's keep this journey going together. Thank you for your support. If you have an encounter story that you would like to share, then please forward your stories to OntarioCryptids@gmail.com. I would be honored to share your story with like-minded people. Now sit back and relax as we begin with today's episode. This first one takes place on May 4th, 2012. We're going to be heading to Morgan County, Indiana, and the nearest town is Martinsville. Our encounter was on May 4th, 2012 in the Indiana State Forestry. My wife and I were camped out in a campground with the area to ourselves. All night, while cooking and eating and sitting by the fire, we kept hearing something large move behind our camp, but out of sight from the fire. After bedding down, I came out at 2 a.m. to relieve myself. Standing there, I looked over to our SUV and saw something standing on the other side of it. At first, I thought it was a tree until it moved away from the tree and closer to the car, and was just standing there swaying back and forth. Its waist came up to the roof of the car where my shoulders hit, and I'm 6 foot. This put this thing's height at about 8 to 9 feet tall. I ran and grabbed my LED super bright flashlight and shined it right on the large hairy covered creature. It immediately ran by me, stepping over the 3.5 foot road gate like it wasn't even there, and ran behind our tent into the woods. The creature ran so fast I couldn't keep track of it with my light. About 30 minutes to an hour later, we heard 2 loud knocks and several small rocks began hitting our tent. This went on for about an hour as we sat on our cots looking out. Then one big rock hit us with such force that it ripped our tent roof off, through the fly, and this was our brand new Coleman tent, used for the first time, and it was a $200 tent. The next morning, I found a trail and partial prints of something about 30 feet behind our tent, and the bark on the root of the tree, where I thought I saw the figure, had been torn off, where something stepped on it. It was a fresh tear, as it was still oozing sap the next morning. So after all that, we packed up and came home, wife and I scared to stay another night. I know that was a squatch in the woods that night. He owes me a tent. And new underwear for us both. When I was 7 or 8 years old, my brother and I, along with other kids from our neighborhood, were playing hide and seek. It was my turn to seek, so I had to go inside the house to cover my eyes and count to 100. Nobody could see me in there while we were hiding, so I decided to cheat. I went upstairs and started looking out the window to see where everybody was hiding. When I got into my older brother's room to look out the window, I had just gone down counting to 100, so I had to get back downstairs fast. I looked out the window really quick and then turned around to head out. Before I had taken 2 steps, the bedroom door slammed shut, which really startled me more than anything. But then I felt compelled to look at the attic door, which was in that room. I heard something moving in there, so I backed up as far away from the doors as I could get. The attic was already terrifying to me because of other experiences I encounter involving it. My back was now pressed against the wall, furthest from the doors. I felt trapped in the room because I didn't want to go near the door that had just slammed shut by itself which happened to be the only exit from the bedroom. And then I heard a loud growl come from inside the attic. It instantly felt like my heart stopped. My chest was actually hurting. It's hard to describe the kind of feeling of sheer terror. I wanted to scream, but I was so terrified that I just couldn't. I just stood there motionless, waiting for whatever it was to get me. Fortunately, within a few seconds, my brother opened up the door and started yelling at me for being in his room. I ran right past him and straight outside. I didn't tell anyone about what had happened. They wouldn't believe me anyway. That was the first time I heard that growl in that house, but not the last. A year or so later, I was in the upstairs bathroom. I heard the growl again, which terrified me and caused me to stop what I was doing and get downstairs. This time, however, I heard the growl a second time as I was quickly making my way back downstairs. It was coming from inside of my parents' bedroom, so I stopped and looked in there. I saw my dad was in the bed asleep, and a feeling of relief instantly came over me, realizing that I wasn't alone up there. When the growl happened again, I knew immediately that it was my dad snoring. I felt so relieved and kind of silly for being scared in the first place. I even wondered if that's what I had heard the first time coming from the attic, but there was still no explanation for the door slamming shut by itself. Some years later, I went into the bathroom upstairs without any fear. It had been a while since I had experienced anything, so I was no longer terrified to go upstairs by myself. While I was doing my business, I heard the growl again. I was a little scared, but I knew that it was probably just my dad in his bed snoring again, so I finished my business and started walking to the stairs. Just to confirm it was him, I looked into the bedroom on my way down. He wasn't there. I was alone upstairs. That feeling of sheer terror came over me instantly again, and I ran downstairs. Fortunately, we moved out of that house not long after that. For the feature story, we're going to be heading to Ross County, Ohio. These occur between the years of 1999 and 2021. Hello there. For the sake of my privacy, please call me Fred. I'm a lifelong resident of Ohio and hail from Ross County. I have 2 encounters which I will share with you and your audience. My first sighting of a Bigfoot came when I was 11 years old in 1999. My family and I were in a family car returning home from Illinois after visiting my uncle, aunt, and cousins for Thanksgiving. Dad was driving and Mom was humming and singing, which is just something she's always done for as long as I can remember. My sister was seated beside me and behind Mom, I think trying to converse with her while Dad was no doubt focused on the road ahead during our ride. Now, I don't know if we were still in Illinois or if we'd crossed the state line into Indiana yet, but I think we were in the Hoosier state at this point of the car ride. I remember staring out of my window and looking into the trees when I saw something furry, tall, and black walking through those trees and thickets. I probably only saw it for about 6 to 8 seconds, but it felt like an eternity watching this thing ambling along like it didn't have a care in the world. Before I knew it, I blurted out, "I saw a Bigfoot, just like Harry in Harry and the Hendersons. I see one right now in the woods." My mom gave me a quizzical look and my sister did somewhat of the same and called me a dork. Dad said something like, "That's malarkey, Fred. Bigfoot isn't real." I protested and doubled down, saying that I did see a Bigfoot and then described what I saw to them. My dad said again I was spewing nonsense, that I didn't see a Bigfoot, and if I saw something, it was probably a local guy wearing a big coat out there for some unknown reason. Anyhow, Dad shut me down on this while my mom gave me a sympathetic look, although I knew she wasn't going to back me up. I just let it go since I knew none of them believed me. That was my very first sighting of a Bigfoot, but not my last. Fast forward to April of 2021. My parents own a few acres of land not far from the family house, and in the middle of that land, they have a small cabin surrounded by trees on the property. My family members have used the cabin over the years for various things, including a gathering place for parties and celebrations, a place to hunt out of for the deer season, and one of my female cousins even lived in it once for a few months when she'd been down out of her luck and didn't have anywhere else to go. When I'm not working and have time off, I like to go to the cabin to relax, spend some quality time with nature, as well as a good book. That's exactly what I've been doing for several years now, and I find it's beneficial for my mental health to have that alone time away from other human beings, since people typically stress me out. On that particular day, my first one back to the cabin in April of that year, I was in the process of unloading my Jeep when I saw something that was standing about 15 feet from me, closely observing what I was doing. It was a reddish kind of copperish color with fur that was maybe 4 inches long. At first my brain was like, hey, that's an orangutan. But then I immediately dismissed that thought from my brain and said no to myself, that's a juvenile Bigfoot. It then tentatively and cautiously approached me until we were 10 feet apart, and then it stopped. It was between 4 feet 7 inches to 4 feet 9 inches tall, clearly a male, and it smelled like a dog that never had a bath in its life. When it was closer, though, I could clearly see this wasn't a juvenile Bigfoot. He had a very human-looking face, not like that of a gorilla or primate. His nose was not like mine, but albeit a little broader, and his lips weren't like a gorilla's or a chimpanzee, but like a person's. The head was not conical, and it did appear to have a neck, although it was a very short neck. The arms were long and his hands hung down past the knees. While diminutive in stature, less than 5 feet tall, it was very muscular everywhere and wide nonetheless. The ears, well, it only had one ear. It looked like the other might have been torn off. The ear that remained, though, was mostly flat against the side of the head and barely protruding. One of the most noticeable things was this fellow also had a large scar that started about 1/4 of an inch under his right eye, which ran vertically down and over the lips. The scar continued downwards and then hooked right, giving it a bit of a letter L shape. It ran through the light fur on the face, and no fur grew where the noticeable scar was. Something or someone had clearly harmed this fellow in his lifetime. He also had a little gray around his temples and lines near the eyes. My final thoughts regarding him was that he was a Bigfoot that possibly had some type of dwarfism. Well, that, or maybe there are a tribe of Bigfoot that are all around that size. Who knows? Those listening are probably wondering if I was scared. No, I wasn't. I didn't feel threatened or intimidated by him. I think he was just curious and wanted to investigate. He just stood there and tilted his head sideways at me. This probably took place in the span of literally minutes before he gave me a big, dopey, goofy smile. It wasn't menacing, it was childlike. He grinned at me like we were friends and he's known me his entire life. He turned around and walked back towards the forest before turning around to smile at me one more time. And then he went into the woods and was quickly gone from my sight. I then took my items that I retrieved from the Jeep and went inside the cabin. The rest of the day I read my book and reflected on my encounter with a Bigfoot. The next morning I made myself breakfast at the table, which consisted of scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, grapefruit, and a banana. After placing the food on the table and taking a seat, I noticed he had returned. He was looking in the window, smiling that dopey smile at me again. He looked at my breakfast and licked his lips like he was hungry. He then looked back at me again. I thought if he was hungry, then I would feed him. I took my plate of breakfast, carefully opened up the front door as not to drop anything, and then walked outside. I returned his smile while placing the food I had quickly piled onto the plate, onto the porch before taking 2 steps back. He looked at me, then down at the food, and then back up at me. It was like he was silently saying, "This is for me?" I maintained my smile as he stepped up, bent over, and picked up the plate before turning around and going back into the forest. Like the day prior, before he reached the wooded area and entered, he gave one look back at me, smiling as if in thanks. I stared out into the woods another 10 minutes, watching the way he had gone, but didn't see him again. I went inside and prepared another breakfast since I was now rather hungry. Later that evening, I went out to the Jeep and placed several bananas, grapefruits, oranges on the hood along with a block of cheddar cheese and half a block of Swiss cheese and some chocolate bars that I had in the cabin before returning back inside. I peeked out the window a couple of times and the items were still there. When I peeked out almost an hour later, everything was gone. The following day, he did not show back up when I was having my breakfast. I ate and went outside when I noticed there was some items on the hood of my Jeep where I'd left the food for him. I gathered in exchange for the food he wanted to give me some items in return. There were 3 highly polished blue rocks, a large flint arrowhead, a Susan B. Anthony dollar coin, a Canadian $20 bill that was torn with bite marks on it, a pine cone, and the head and arm of a Barbie doll. I never saw him again, but my wishes are that wherever he is, I hope he's well. Additionally, the night before I went back to my home, I saw 2 triangle-shaped UFOs silently floating near the cabin and moving up and around each other as though they were dancing. When I took a couple of steps down on the porch for a better view, they stopped in midair as though they had noticed me. Both were glowing along the edges, but being nighttime, I couldn't see anything else color-wise, just that they were as dark as pitch away from those edges. Soon they both shot straight up into the sky at an unbelievable speed and were gone. I don't know if me seeing them had anything to do with the Bigfoot, but it felt like more than just a coincidence. Anyhow, as a man coming from a family of non-believers, thank you for letting me get this off my chest. Fred. Well, that ends today's episode, and I hope you all enjoyed these encounter stories today. Fred, thank you for sharing your encounter with us here at Ontario Cryptids. I'm happy we assisted you with getting this off of your chest. And Fred, I believe you saw a Bigfoot when you were young. Interesting comments around this fellow possibly having a form of dwarfism. I hope you get to meet this fellow again in the near future. Thank you for sharing your encounter. Now to acknowledge the current OC members, I would like to thank Elizabeth, Jim, Diana, and Teresa for their contribution and support as members of the OC community. Thank you all for your support. If you wish to learn more about the OC membership program, you can check out our membership video to get detailed description of all the perks you will receive. Don't miss out on the adventure. Become a member now and join us today. If these stories reminded you of an encounter you may have had, please forward them to OntarioCryptids@gmail.com. I would be honored to share your story on this channel. Thank you all for listening until the end. I truly appreciate it. Please hit the like button on your way out and smash the subscribe button if you're new to this channel. And don't forget to hit that notification bell. Have a wonderful weekend, and we hope to see you all next week right here on Ontario Cryptids.